accurate. Let's just say.
Okay, and I would like to remind the audience that I'm talking to Eddie McNamara. He is the author of the book Brooklyn Hardcore, a novel. And I would also like to invite anyone who is listening to this to make your request for future episodes of Black Box Online Radio. Is there a true crime case that you would like discussed on the show? Is there a guest that you would like on this program? You can put your ideas in the comment section down below, or you can send them to me, Ned DeHaan, at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And feel free to visit some of the links in the description box. One of them is for BuyMeACoffee.com. BuyMeACoffee.com/BlackBoxNed88 allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday. All right, Eddie, you also have a lot of observations, though, about the Lake Herman Road murders, and I was actually given the suggestion of having you on the program from someone because they said that Eddie looks at the Lake Herman Road case in a very different way. And firstly, would you like to give us an introduction about the Lake Herman Road murders and then talk about your theory?
Okay, sure. Yeah. So the Lake Herman Road murders happened. What is it? December 20th, 1968.
Yes.
And a young high school couple, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, I believe they're on their first date, and they end up on Lake Herman Road, which is thought to be it's a road between Benicia and Vallejo, and there's a turnoff. There's like a pump station, and it's thought to be sort of a lover's lane, and they are murdered in this lover's lane, and immediately, they're really solid citizens. These kids, they're good kids. They're not involved in this David Faraday is like the most all-American kid that ever lived. He's a high school wrestler. He's an Eagle Scout. It turns out later, is the kind of guy that would go to police and tell them about a drug deal that's about to happen. So like these are two like really like sincerely, seemingly wonderful children, and they're teenagers and they're murdered at gunpoint. David's seems like David is taken out of the car and shot in the head once, and Betty Lou runs and she gets shot multiple times. And it's just awful. It's just like one of these absolutely horrific cases. It happens in Benicia, California. It's a small community, and to the credit of local law enforcement and Les Lundblad, he throws everything at this investigation. He brings in investigators from the California Department of Justice, from Fairfield, from Vallejo, from a bunch of surrounding jurisdictions. They investigate every possible angle that can be investigated. In this case, drugs, rivalries, people who may have had affections for, Betty Lou, a fight that David got into at a restaurant, a few possible drug angles, and Solano County really, they investigate this. It's so thorough. It's like they put such a amazing effort into this, and after 6 months, there's still no resolve. They're still looking into it. And in Vallejo, California, there's a sort of a one-day crime spree that happens. A gas station is robbed, a man is murdered, another man is shot and kidnapped, and this is June of 1969, and Vallejo police shortly after arrest 4 men in this case, and that's David Magris, Michael Staffer. I'm going to call him Mike S from now on, and the Donahue brothers, and they're taken into custody for that murder. Now there's still no Zodiac. Zodiac does not come until a month later, and in July, after the murders in Vallejo at Blue Rock Springs, Zodiac takes credit for this Lake Herman Road case, says that he did that one too, and he gives a slightly more visceral, he gives details in the case that are actual factual details, and it's thought to be a Zodiac murder. And I think is that is that the type of setup? Was I too biased on that setup, or?
No, that's very good, though. But I would like to ask, what date was this one-day crime spree in Northern California that you talked about?
I think it's June 3rd, 69.
Okay, so as you said, 1 month prior to the Blue Rock Springs shooting, and that'd be roughly 6 months after the Lake Herman Road murders. And all right, now please continue.
Okay, so this is where I think the case gets very interesting in July/August of 1969. Now Vallejo has these one-day crime spree people in custody, and it'd be David Magris and his friends. And Vallejo then contacts Sergeant Cunningham of Solano County, and Sergeant Cunningham goes to lockup and talks to these 4 young men. One of these 4 young men confesses to him that he was present for the murder of David and Betty Lou. He was not the sole gunman, but he was present for it, and he identifies the gunman, which is one of the other 4 men that he is arrested with for the one-day crime spree. And so, Cunningham looks into this, and supposedly the evidence the boy gives, he gives Betty Lou's purple dress, he gives the caliber of gun and where he threw it, which was in the bay in Vallejo, and there was another bit of information he gave that Cunningham believes only the killer could have known. But again, like, I really don't love that only the killer could have known stuff. But he seems credible enough to a sergeant with the Vallejo with the Solano County. So Cunningham follows through with this, and he writes up. He gets a file on them. He interviews them, and then he brings the file to his boss, Les Lundblad, who was, again, like, the hardest work. He put in the most work of anyone in the Zodiac case. And Lundblad does not buy it at all. He's not happy with these suspects at all. He's not into it, and he dismisses it. And Cunningham feels really badly and really strangely about it. Like, he kind of thinks that, to use a Kobach term, Cunningham didn't use it, but I'll use the Kobach term, that Lundblad caught Zodiac fever, and he's presenting him a file that will put these murderers away. And they're already murderers. They've committed other murders, but we'll put them. He thinks he has a solve on Lake Herman Road. He has the guys. The guy confessed to it, and then 2 civilians, a member of a motorcycle gang, who's also likely a drug dealer, and a civilian woman who's likely a waitress, come forward and identify the redheaded one out of this group as the killer at Lake Herman Road. So now it's not just a jailhouse confession. I don't love jailhouse confessions, but there is a jailhouse confession from one of these people. And now there's 2 other witnesses that are pointing to this group of people as the killers at Lake Herman Road. Lundblad does not want to go forward with it. And somehow the Vallejo guys, now they're the ones who, the Vallejo PD arrested these 4 men. And there are at least 5 officers within Vallejo. Let me see if I can think of them right now. It's Lynch, Conway, Bauert, Rust, and maybe more, who do not believe Zodiac did Lake Herman at the time. Do not believe that Zodiac did Lake Herman Road. They believe Lake Herman Road was the work of these one-day spree guys who were also happened to be drug dealers. 2 of them happened to be drug dealers. 2 of them we know a lot less about. So Mike S. and David Magris were drug dealers in Vallejo at the time. So they're, Vallejo has a completely different idea about this, but for some reason, Solano really just sort of, they did this amazing investigation for 6 or 7 months, and then it grinds to a halt once the Zodiac letter comes. And I don't know why. But like again, Lundblad is one of the heroes of this story because he turned over every stone. But as soon as those Zodiac letters, the three of them end up at the newspapers, there's a incredible shift between his gung ho pursuit of the killer of the two teenagers at Lake Herman Road, and his sort of putting everything on ice afterwards. It's not even, there's no evidence that he supplied any fingerprints or hard evidence to the FBI lab whatsoever from Solano County at all in this case. So it really, this really becomes a strange thing. And it could very well be, and it doesn't have to be sinister. He could just really believe the Zodiac is credible. The Zodiac letter was credible, and he could believe that the testimony of a murderer in jail, possibly trying to curry favor with the police, is not credible. So he could be, he could, this could be a good job as well. Like he could be doing a good job here as well. But I think the Vallejo guys had an idea that this was something other than a murder at Lover's Lane. They believed it to, and Lynch actually went to the newspaper. I think it was 1970 or 71, and argued against the Zodiac in Lake Herman Road, and thought it was part of a targeted drug murder of David Faraday, and that was his angle, and then if you start to look at the facts of what happened on the night of, that starts to look a lot more plausible.
Okay, though, but I think there's one point that we do need to address, and that is this red-haired suspect comes up multiple times, and some previous guests on Black Box Online Radio have also mentioned him. Which one of the people that you have listed off so far was the red-haired suspect?
I have not seen a color picture that can identify any of them as a red-haired suspect. It's not David Magris, because David Magris has black hair. David Magris is he's Latino. He has dark hair. It's not him. It could be any of the other three, but I suppose Mike S would be the, if we had a guess, and I don't want to guess, but one of them is born in Ireland, one of the Donahue brothers, and the other one is his brother. So, either of those could possibly be a light-haired man or a red-headed man, and Mike S could also, from, I've only seen black and white pictures, he could also be a red-headed man. But this is not the big red that I don't believe it's not the motorcycle gang member that Thomas Horan is talking about. This is a different set of criminals who had they're small time criminals. These are like $20 strong arm robbery criminals. They're they're drug dealers, they're drug users, they're gas station robbers. They're burglars, like real cheap burglaries. These are not like sort of sophisticated criminals. They're fresh out of the Marine Corps, and they're just sort of behaving wildly. Magris and Mike S. And that's the type of guys they are. But they are involved in drug sales. And if we look at the murder and what was happening the night of the murder, at Lake Herman Road, I mean, it really looks like a drug crime more than the. I mean, there's apparently motive. There's drug action happening. There's busts happening. There's raids happening, and how people don't go deeper on this could have been a drug crime is it's kind of fascinating to me and a little bit shocking.
Okay, though, but some of the reasons why people don't think that the Lake Herman Road murders were drug-related were that, all right, David Faraday might have some beef with a guy who's pushing grass at his high school and says, I don't like drugs in my school, gets into a confrontation. Normally, that person's drug boss doesn't have a guy like that murdering a high school kid who snitched on somebody. They think that that's too extreme of a retaliation. What's your response to that?
I mean, yeah, that's entirely possible. But if we're looking at the people who may be involved in this, shot two men for no reason, for $27 or something like that. So and this is, at the time it was reported as 2.2 pounds of marijuana. And Pierre Badu later says 1.5 in the 2007 documentary. But so this is a significant amount of drugs that, and if they're willing to shoot people over basically pocket change, $20 or $30, what are they willing to do for 2 pounds of marijuana if someone is snitching to the police on them? If someone gave, Pierre Badu has a warrant to go to the cottage / the Pink House on Lake Herman Road. He does with his partner, and they recover. And I believe the paper made an error, but it's impossible to get any Freedom of Information Act records about this case. I've tried every which way, and I can find no arrest record for this. So, and the paper said that there were two men in the backseat of the car, but I don't believe that to be true. I believe that Badu and his partner went there to the house. The house was empty. There were no suspects on scene, and they recovered between 1.5 and 2.2 pounds of marijuana in the house with nobody else there. So it was like a stash, and they did this based on a warrant, and they were given a tip that a drug deal was about to go down. Lynch's opposition to the Zodiac as the Lake Herman Road killer was based on David Faraday snitching about a drug deal that was about to go down. So now this night where this happens, right? So a raid happens on the cottage / the Pink House, right? It's called two different things. And simultaneously, that's a raid by Benicia police. Simultaneously, Solano does a raid at the Hells Angels clubhouse in Vallejo. That's Butterback and Waterman, and I believe that's for 45 minutes. They're off there, and Badu, his partner, and a supervisor are off at the cottage, and David Faraday is driving around Lake Herman Road where this drug bust is going down. This is happening, I believe it's 0.3 miles or 0.4 miles from the spot that he's murdered. So it could be a complete coincidence that David Faraday, who's believed by Vallejo detectives to be a drug snitch who told about a drug deal about to go down, just so happens to be driving around with his date outside of the location or right near the location of where a drug deal goes down. So this is actually kind of, it's that lends credence to, I guess that's why they didn't go to the Christmas concert, because you want to see something cool. Might have been the reason why they're on Lake Herman Road, because he gave information knowing something was going to happen. And go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask another challenge question, because this is something that comes up a lot with the drug-related theory at the Lake Herman Road murders. And it's simply that, why would David bring Betty Lou to watch a drug bust go down, to watch police sirens go by, or even possibly have anything to do with these drug dealers when they're on their first date? They don't even know each other that well. They haven't known each other for an extended period of time. I mean, yes, they met previously before, of course, but why would he do that when, I mean, what benefit would that serve David Faraday on his first date with Betty Lou?
I mean, this would be total supposition on my end, but it's his first date with Betty Lou. Like, how could you top the adventure of, do you want to see a drug bust go down? And David, these are square kids. Like, they're not the kind of kids that are seeing drug busts go down. Like, I don't think Betty Lou, I think this guy is offering some type of adventure, like some type of like, what, you want to see something cool? And, it could be, I mean, if the options are a Christmas concert or, just hanging out at the turnout on Lake Herman Road, or do you want to see something first? Do you want to see something wild? The police make a drug bust, and maybe he thinks people are going to be there. Maybe he thinks something's going to happen. I mean, again, I was a police officer, and people always stop and watch. If there's any police activity going on, it's for some reason the most entertaining thing in the world to people. I don't like if the cops are arresting somebody in the street. I don't care, but people love to stop and watch and rubberneck, and like basically all traffic on the highway is because of police activity, and people slow down. There's some people love to see this type of thing. I mean, the show Cops was popular for how long? How many scripted police shows are there? I think it's a sense of excitement for some people, and I don't know how exciting Benicia, California would be for 17-year-olds, especially those type of 17-year-olds in 1968. They're good kids. They're not drug users. They're not wild kids. He's like, do you want to see the cops arrest some drug dealers? I think he's offering adventure. He's offering a very exciting night to Betty Lou right there. If you want to impress a girl, take her to where something wild's about to happen. And again, he's a teenager, so this isn't like an adult with like a fully weighing consequences versus potential dangers. I mean, teenagers make some pretty reckless decisions, and this could very well be. And I'm not saying it is, but it's strange that a suspected drug snitch is in the vicinity on the same street that a drug bust goes down based on a tip.
Well, yes, but right now, though, I would like to hear your full assessment of how you believe the Lake Herman Road murders happened. How did the perpetrator arrive? Who was ordered out of the car first? I mean, who was shot first? All of that.
Okay, so I think two of these guys, David Magris and someone else. I believe David Magris is the one who confessed. Probably 70% believe it was David Magris who confessed. He's an admitted drug dealer. He admitted that later in life. I believe he is the one who confessed. I believe that him and one of his friends, and I don't know which one of his friends, but him and one of his friends had something to do with this drug deal. Either they were buying or selling. They had something to do with it, and they were in the area of Lake Herman Road. And I think they saw David Faraday, and I think they put two and two together that David Faraday had snitched on them. And I think they followed them. And I think they ordered them out of the car. David ordered out of the car. I think one person, and this would mirror their other crime in a way. One of the men went with Faraday, and the other one didn't. The one who went with Faraday had him out of the car on his feet, standing near the front, shot him in the head. And that sets the whole thing into motion. I don't think that, I think they probably meant to scare him. They probably meant to say, don't say anything to the cops. That type of thing. I don't think it was meant. And I think the non-David Magris person sort of set the whole thing into motion by shooting Faraday. And then the same person may or may not have shot Betty Lou as well. But I don't think David Magris knew that they were going there for a murder. I think he was as surprised as anyone. And I think they went there to scare somebody or to mess with them or something like that. And it got out of hand in seconds. And I think he was, as Cunningham said, he was very willing to confess. He really couldn't, and he's gonna get the gas chamber for the Vallejo crime. Like, there's no doubt about it. He was a shooter. He was, he's gonna get the gas chamber for that. Confessing to another murder is not gonna lighten that, it's not gonna lighten that sentence. If he's like, well, I confessed to another murder, I'm not gonna get the death penalty. Well, I don't see the logic in that. I think this is David Magris possibly unburdening himself. He later becomes a born-again Christian. He becomes very religious. He gets the man who he shot in Vallejo, the one who survived, to forgive him, and they stay in contact later in life. Magris becomes very involved in his church. He becomes very involved in his community. He becomes after his prison sentence, I think he gets out in obviously they get rid of the death penalty in 72, so he's not going to get the death penalty. And I think he gets out in 85 or 87. He becomes he works for a charity helping the families of death row inmates. He becomes a very religious man. He becomes a good person. I mean, if there was ever someone who probably shouldn't have gotten the death penalty and prison did rehabilitate him, he got a degree in prison, he got a GED and a degree in prison. It's David Magris. He becomes sort of an exemplary person. He gets married. But before that, he's pretty much the worst guy. He's out of the Marine Corps for 1 year, and he's in and out of jail. He's doing burglaries. He's dealing drugs. He's doing robberies, and so I believe he's the one who confessed. I think I think it's just more of his character that he would be the one who would want to sort of unburden himself with this, and I think he's the one who confessed that him and a partner rolled up on them, and then it's kind of what it's kind of his Vallejo testimony too, is that things got out of control, but he does admit to shooting someone in Vallejo when one of his partners sort of set matters out of control. So
okay,
that's
excuse me.
No.
Yes. What do you make of Thomas Henry Horn's assessment of this, that the shooter at Lake Herman Road who acted first exited the passenger side car of the car that was parked next to David and Betty Lou, and then that person either shot at them directly or possibly even shot a warning shot, and that was the first bullet fired. And it sounds like you're pretty sold that there were two shooters and there were multiple assailants at Lake Herman Road that were present at the crime scene, right? But,
yeah, his confession was that there were two shooters and he was not the trigger man. So he confessed to the shooting. He confessed to being at the shooting, but not being the shooter. I mean, it's the one stray shot that's sort of at the top of the car. That it could be a warning shot. It could, but then I don't know. I feel like I don't know if that's the case. I don't necessarily believe that's the case. I think Faraday is an athlete. Faraday is he's a wrestler. He's an Eagle Scout. I think he's gonna fight for his life. I don't think he's gonna. I think he was lulled into believing he was gonna talk to somebody, and that person shot him. Sneakily shot him. I don't think that person came at him with a gun. I think he got out of the car to have a conversation. Totally, the last thing in the world he suspected was getting shot in the head. I think, and that's just based on conjecture. I just don't think I think there's so many other things that would have happened. If someone's firing warning shots, are you going to get out? Are you going to, I think, survival instinct sort of kicks in there. And I think he would have acted very differently. I think it's to me, it seems like he got out of the car not feeling that threatened, not feeling that he was, like totally believing he was going to survive the encounter. And then the person shot him. And then either that person or their partner shot Betty Lou multiple times. And to me, that makes a lot more sense than a warning shot. He's going to try to drive out of there. He's going to try to fight. And none of that is there's no evidence of any of that.
okay, though, but how do you believe the shooters acted toward Betty Lou? Because Betty Lou appeared to have been running away from the trigger man. And do you think she was ordered to run, or do you think she just got really scared because David had been shot first and then she just took off and tried to sneak away? What exactly do you think happened to Betty Lou at the crime scene? How were the killer or killers controlling her?
I think the natural reaction is as soon as David is shot, I think the natural reaction is for her to get the hell out of there. I can't see her standing around and waiting for it to happen to her. So I imagine she just took off and then they just either one or both of them began firing at her and shot her multiple times until she stopped. I just don't, I don't see another situation where like and like nobody really, Cunningham didn't mention anything about someone testifying to being, sort of confessing to being the good guy that was like, I was going to let the girl go, or that there's nothing like that. So it's I think it's just a natural reaction to a horrible witnessing. You're on a first date with somebody, he gets popped in the head. You're just gonna take off, get the hell out of there before it happens to you. And they just, one or both of them happen to get her before that.
Okay, and do you believe that both of them exited out of the appropriate side of the car, like Betty Lou exited the passenger side and David Faraday exited the driver's side and walked around?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. I don't have
Some
a.
people think that David and Betty Lou were like held up at gunpoint, like the gunman walked around to the driver's side and held up the gun, and then they both exited the passenger side. You can even see that in certain Zodiac documentaries. They do that, and then the killer would walk around, grab David and shoot him. Betty Lou's already running, and then starts firing. I mean, I don't remember the exact documentary that I was watching that showed that, but that was their assessment of it.
I mean, it's entirely possible. I think any of these things are possible. It's entirely possible that two armed men stood there, they got out of the car, and moved around. It could be either way. I mean, I don't really, nothing points to one more than the other. That that he got out. I don't have a really strong feeling about that either way.
Okay, sure. And what do you make of Les Lundblad's assessment of the murder of Betty Lou, that the killer would not have needed a pencil flashlight taped to the gun barrel the way the Zodiac described, because it was a very clear area, and more or less Betty Lou's body would have been silhouetted by the night sky and the moonlight, and then more or less all the killer had to do was just aim the gun at the black silhouette and just fire.
I mean, I think he's an experienced law enforcement officer in that particular area. I don't see why not. I think the pencil flashlight seems to be a bit ridiculous. Actually, like tons of shootings happen at night. Tons of murders happen at night. The David Magris was a Marine. He just got out of the Marine Corps. The guy was he was adept at shooting. I don't know if I mean, I know people always like are hung up on this flashlight thing, and I don't. There's tons of crimes that happen. There's tons of shootings that go down without a flashlight and a gun in rural areas, in secluded areas, in woodsy areas. I find that to be a weird, sort of fact given by the Zodiac in the letters about the pencil flashlight.
Right, but I mean, you're completely correct that if you watch episodes of Forensic Files or something, there'll be a murder that took place outside at night, right, with no flashlight. But the reason why it comes up, I think, is because the Zodiac said that Les Lundblad's assessment of the crime was impossible because there wouldn't have been enough clear space for that to have taken place. So that's why he used the pencil flashlight taped to the gun barrel. Now, again, unsolved case. You seem to completely dispute everything the Zodiac has said about Lake Herman Road and being there, but I'm just throwing that in.
I mean, it's what, it's like one of those things. It's entirely possible. It seems ridiculous, but just because it seems ridiculous doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, he could have taped a flashlight, and what's his name? Kobek could be right that he read about it in Popular Science, in whatever issue of Popular Science in 1964 about a flashlight taped, or whatever, he suspected that the Zodiac, his suspect got this idea from. I mean, a lot of these things are possible. Probable, I don't know. And it's, I don't know. It sort of makes me seem like it makes me think that the killer wasn't there. Again, like everything about Lake Herman Road that the killer says makes it. It just doesn't resonate with me. Even just like, oh yeah, I had a pencil flashlight. That's how I did it. Like you're totally wrong. And it's just like it's such a weird. It's I guess I'm of two minds about that. It's such a weird thing that it could it might be true that but it's also. It's not like like a lot of shooters don't go around with pencil flashlights. It's I don't know. I think he's trying harder to link himself to that case. Where I think it's like it's effortless when you look at if you look at any of the other ones, if you look at, say, the other two, if you look at San Francisco and if you look at Blue Rock Springs, it's a compelling narrative he tells. You're like, this guy was there. This guy saw this. This guy witnessed, these cops coming afterwards. He witnessed the fire department coming, or he witnessed what Darlene was wearing. He witnessed David get shot in the leg, and not David. Mike gets shot in the leg and jump into the back of the car. Like I believe that guy was there. This guy who's Super X, 10 shots, pencil flashlight. I don't buy it.
Okay, though, but what place in the reports would you recommend that people look for more information about David Magris? Because this is a two-part question. It sounds like your suspects for the Lake Herman Road murders are David Magris and another unknown assailant. And also, are there any other pieces of media or writing where people can find info about David Magris?
Yeah, there's a fantastic Substack. Let me just pull it up. I want to get the name right.
Sure.
I believe his name is Joseph Shores, and it's josephs.substack.com, and it's Cunningham's Suspects and he has a fairly detailed bit of information about the suspects, and I have a newspaper.com membership. Through the public library. I've looked into Magris on that. I then looked into Magris on social media. I found him on Facebook. I found him on LinkedIn when he died in August. And there's tons of articles about David Magris. If you look up, he was a celebrity inmate really in the 70s when they were doing away with the death penalty. Magris and his partner Mike Schwertstager, I believe it's pronounced. It's very hard to in the Vallejo murders. Mike has a 130 IQ, and the two of them were sort of media darlings in the 70s and 80s. They were the guys who were getting reformed in prison. They were getting degrees. They were learning skills. They were becoming much better people than the men they were before. So there's a lot about David Magris out there. If you look into him, there's tons of articles about him. I believe he was on a television show after a news program after he got out of prison in the 80s. There's an article about his reconciliation with the man he shot. So there's quite a bit about David Magris, and he does not obviously in the media publicly say anything about Lake Herman Road. He's not going to go back to jail for something but he talks about being a very bad person when he was out and before prison. So yeah, you can find a lot about him.
Excuse me again, yes. But at this time, would you like to tell the audience about your novel, Brooklyn Hardcore?
Sure. It's Brooklyn Hardcore, and it's a noir crime novel. It's sort of in the vein of like The Wanderers or Trainspotting. It's about a group of friends from the hardcore punk scene in New York City in the 1990s, and they commit crimes. They're involved in crimes, and so it's a lot of hardcore. It's a lot of hardcore punk music, and there's a bit of boxing and a lot of violence, and it intersects with the mob. And it's doing pretty well amongst people with a music background and a punk rock background, and it came out in August, and I think you'd like it. You can get it cheap on Kindle. It's $4.99. On the Kindle, and it's available on Amazon or Barnes and Noble and some indie stores.
Fascinating. Sounds amazing, though. And other than that, though, Eddie, do you have any final concluding message, send off, or any additional notes for the listeners of Black Box Online Radio?
No, I just I really want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. I hope I was okay with this is my first time speaking with anyone about Zodiac in I believe in real life. Actually having a conversation. And not on a computer. And I hope at least. I mean, I don't think anyone has to. You don't have to. I don't want anyone to agree with me. I just want them to consider some of these things that especially about the Toschi letters, that some of the things about this case are it's really, there's a lot of unreliable narrators, and I am not married to any of this. If someone can prove to me that Toschi didn't write the letters, I will gladly, the Brommel suspect, I'm far less convinced of him than I was a year ago. If someone can point out that David Magris was in jail for burglary or something like that on the night of the Lake Herman Road, I will move on from that. I'm just what I'm pointing out is I'm looking at killers and similar crimes in the exact same area as Zodiac crimes, and two matched up, the Lake Herman Road and Presidio Heights. So I hope people keep an open mind, and and just you don't have to agree with me, but just consider it.
Eddie McNamara, thank you so much.
Thank you, Ned.